Hi, my name is Dan Halsey. I'm with United Designers and Southwoods Ecosystems here with the Global Earth Repair Conference and having our interviews with different people. We have Regina and Sara here as our co-interviewers. Hi, ladies. And we're having some questions about climate and what's happening around the world and doing this in our 24-hour global check-in. And right now we have with us Yanniek, and who's going to introduce her?
Hi.
Or she can introduce herself. Regina.
She's Yanniek. I think she's Yanniek. She's working, I think, in La Junquera with the Regeneration Academy that she's afterwards going to tell us about.
Yes.
And we are very happy that she has decided to start this academy in Murcia. So thank you, Yanniek, and welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for being here.
So much.
We'll get started with this. I love the area that you're working there and working with the ERC, and very much connected to ecosystem restoration and adaptation, all the things that are going on with that. So our first question I want to basically ask you as we're working into this is from your life and from where you've lived and from where you're living now, what kind of trends have you seen from the past, the present, and the future for climate change? Have your observations been?
Yes. Well, I've seen from where I lived in the Netherlands that climate change is becoming an increasingly important issue. Like for me personally, the air, for example, in the Netherlands is really of bad quality. So I got asthma basically because of breathing. And for me, that was a very big thing, and a thing to see that we need to change something. And that's just one of the many things that I've seen. I've seen it on the soils. I've seen it in the food that we've been eating, but also on the more irregular rain events. I've always lived on rural areas in which sometimes the weather would totally not make sense anymore, and the farmers were lost. And then I got here in Spain, and it was actually even worse, like more irregular rain events. Now, for example, we had a drought of 4 months in the winter, which is crazy because normally the winter should be the wet season. It was too warm, the crops bloomed too early, then they died when it got cold all of a sudden in April. So there's a lot happening on the land, as well as in the air, what I described in the Netherlands, what I saw happening and felt happening. And that's basically what for me and from my viewpoint is the most important, like at least the most important thing that I see happening. And for me, food, what we eat is very, very important. And with climate change, that changes so much.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of adaptation do you think that we need to move into then long term with the changes that are coming in the extreme weather events, especially there or anywhere?
Anywhere, yeah. Well, I think we have to totally change our way of doing agriculture. We're now heading towards a very industrialized type of agriculture, a very monocultural type of agriculture in which we use a lot of pesticides, herbicides, fungicides. I think that should stop right away because that changes a lot the soil, changes a lot how the soil can take up carbon. It changes a lot the evapotranspiration of the soil, which changes a lot the weather, which makes the area drier, which makes it less rainy. And in the end, we're in Murcia, Spain, where it's super dry. There's already areas that nothing can grow anymore. So I think the change in the way we do agriculture is, of course, amongst a lot of aspects, one of, for me, the most important ones. And on La Junquera, we're doing that in many ways. We're working with ground covers. We're working with capturing more water so that we can plant more trees that can actually survive. We're doing a lot of natural zone restorations in which we plant thousands of trees to just bring back that little bit of shade, which can bring back more life, which can bring back rain, and hopefully change, at least in this area, a bit the climate, and maybe even if we do it on a large enough scale, other climates as well.
Have you seen farmers or activities of people that are trying to deal with this for better or worse? Are people actually working on it proactively?
Yeah, so we're part of this association of farmers called Alvelo. There's 200 farmers in this region that are actively working on making their farm regenerative, as we call it. So it's working with agroecological principles. And they are all working on this topic because basically they will not have a job in 10 years if we cannot change it, because it will be too dry. So we're all working very hard on finding ways to turn the tide, to bring back life to this region in the many ways it is possible.
Do you see there, if things do get to be more extreme, then do you see that there might be some kind of tragedy? That's what I've been reading some documents, and people are now starting to use the word climate tragedy as they're being affected. Is there any way you could see to avoid that?
Well, I think we need a very big change in the whole world to avoid that. And I think we're doing our part, and I hope that more people start doing their part, and I hope it happens soon. So I'm very happy with these global climate strikes of these kids. I hope that wakes up the parents, and I hope that wakes up the companies, because we all have to do our part. And I think many times people feel that, yeah, someone else will do his part, but I don't think that works. So in your own company, in your own personal life, I think you have to do it on many levels and a lot more active than most people are doing it now.
Mm-hmm. So you're thinking a lot of the society is still asleep, or they're not aware of what's going on?
I think it's difficult, right? Because basically if you go outside, life is good. There, sometimes maybe weather is a bit extreme, but you can still buy food in the supermarkets. You can still buy whatever you want. You can still breathe the air in most places. So unless you feel the pain of going through a climate tragedy, so as it happens in some places, you don't see it. So people are quite hard-headed in a sense that, well, it doesn't exist if you don't see it, which is very understandable. I think it's very hard. Like, we're basically required to think about the whole world. Right. It's already hard to think about your friends and family all the time, Like, imagine thinking about something that might happen for your idea in the other side of the world. Like, for example, what you have in China, right? That there's a lot of air pollution, or in other places where there's now flooding. Like, it's so difficult to really empathize with these things that happen so far away.
And Yanniek, since you guys are working with rural people inside inland Spain, do they agree with you? They realize that there's really the climate is changing, and they see that change has to be done, or like the older people do not agree with that so much?
I think people really, like the people that work the land, they really feel that there's a change happening. They know it because the rivers have run dry. Like, before the rivers were there, before there was snow in the winters, it's not there anymore. So they know it, and they see it, and they feel it on their land, because many of their crops don't work anymore, and they have to change, and their soil isn't as good as it was before, and it's hotter, or it's colder, or it's more dry in the wrong time of the year. So they do feel it. I think for them it's just really hard in this current system that we've created to change their ways, because what is pushed is conventional agriculture and using like pesticides and herbicides and having a monoculture because that's most economically interesting, and it's very difficult to change that, because then what do you do?
Yes, I understand.
So people are invested in that, and that's what makes it difficult. It's very difficult for, if they, I was thinking of this earlier this week, is basically if people, say you just moved to the Altiplano, if you just arrived in the Altiplano now, you would base your crops and you would base everything you're doing on the existing situation, just like people did, hundreds of years ago. But now if you've already been there and you have this vision of how it's been, you would assume it's going to keep doing that way, but you're so invested in how it's been, it's very difficult for you to have a new vision for the future. But it sounds like what you're saying is that the practices have to change based on now, or what?
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, definitely. It has to happen soon, because we're on the border of the desert here. So the desert is creeping inland, and like basically 50 kilometers further away, it's already becoming more deserty. So, we really have to work hard on it. And it's very hard to think super long term if you still have debts, if you have a house to pay, because maybe your harvest is not good this year. And then, what do you do? So there's also a very important economic issue that you don't always have a lot of options.
Right. So
if you have to pay the bank, but you want to also invest in making your soil better, which costs a lot of money, and you want to plant hedges and borders to increase biodiversity, and you want to do this, how do you combine those?
Right. As a group, and as we've heard in other discussions, it takes a community. It takes everybody in the region to be working towards it, because doing it individually is too much energy and too difficulty. So Regina has opened on here. Maybe you can see your webpage.
Yes, I see it.
And so maybe you can tell us a little bit about Regeneration Academy and what you're doing in the area.
Yes. So basically, we've started an academy for students to do their thesis or internship on our farm, because what we see is that many students have a lot of theoretical knowledge, but they would really like to bring it in practice, and there's not a lot of places to actually do that and to actually help on a practical level to transform this farm to a regenerative farm, because we're not there yet. We're working towards it, but we have a very big farm, and we really want to know as much as we can, also to be an example for other farms. So what we're doing with the students, we're doing a lot of researches and investigations and experiments to find out the best ways to do this new type of farming, regenerative farming. So we've had people focusing on ground cover, like how does this ground cover grow? How do we do it? How does it affect the profits? All these things. We've had students focusing on swales, like how do you make them? What's the best swale possible? Can you plant them with other crops? Can you do intercropping when you have a swale? We're also looking into the water. So how much is the infiltration rate of the rain if you have a different type of management and if you have ponds? And so we're looking into many things with the hope to gain more knowledge on how to do this transition, because it's very difficult to do this transition. So we need as much knowledge as we can to get people convinced that this is something that's actually possible.
And so you're doing obviously a lot of different experiments in the process
Yes.
here, working with a lot of different things. Yeah. Have you been able to see some initial change or things that are being successful?
Yeah, so swales are very successful. You know what they are, right? The canals that you can do on contour line in a field on a hill.
Yes.
And they help to retain water, and they help to stop erosion. So if you make them, your erosion will stop, not only because of the swale, but also because the tractor drivers have to till on contour line. So it has a double function. actually. So those work really well. It's also that because you have the swale, the little canals, they almost work like irrigation. So when you have those, you can actually plant very different type of trees inside the swale than you could normally have in a dryland plot.
Mm-hmm.
So
So
that's
you were
something.
planting inside the swale then, because it's so dry, you plant in the swale where the water is focused.
Yeah, so basically there's a few different techniques. We don't know which one works best yet. One is that you plant inside the swale, and one is that you plant on the other side, on the lower side of the swale.
Mm-hmm.
So we've tried both, and we don't know which one will work best yet.
Okay, and
I
do you
see.
have agreements with the University of Murcia or Valencia to get the students there to do their thesis?
Yeah, so we now, it was quite difficult because the program cost a bit of money, but now we have a funding from Triodos to give grants to Spanish students, so they can come for free to do the whole program. So we have contact with Murcia, with Alicante, with Dutch universities, with some German. So there's a lot of movement. We just, yes, we invite students to come because, yeah, we really need more of all of this.
More of everybody doing
Yes,
it.
more of everyone, more energy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for showing us your site and talking about the project, but also it's great to get your views also of what you've been doing there. And you have a broader sense of what's going on in the world from your travels and different areas that you've lived. So that's very helpful, plus working with the people there with the ERC. Again, I was telling Alfonso, hope to get back there one of these days.
Yes, that would be nice. You're always welcome.
Yeah, get back. It's one of my, I remember the stars. That's what the starry nights are amazing. If you want to see the Milky Way like a rainbow, it was incredible.
It's so beautiful.
So thank you again. And also Regina and Sara. Thank you, Yanniek, and take care. And hopefully we'll talk to you again.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.